Emily never thought an ordinary Saturday afternoon would become the beginning of the most painful revelation of her life. She was home alone, curled on the couch with her laptop, enjoying the rare silence. Her father had left early that morning for a 2-day business trip, and Emily planned to spend the time finishing schoolwork and watching movies. Everything felt calm, predictable, safe. Around noon, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her dad. Emily, Mark, and Jonah might stop by today. I forgot some old documents. Please let them in. Emily didn't think twice about it. Mark and Jonah had been part of her father's life long before she was born. They were the kind of men who attended every birthday party, every backyard barbecue, every small family celebration. Growing up, Emily saw them almost like uncles, people she had no reason to fear or distrust. So when she heard a knock at the door 15 minutes later, she answered with an easy smile, but the moment she opened the door, something felt off. Both men stood there, but not with their usual relaxed, joking expressions. Mark's smile looked forced, stretched unnaturally across his face, while Jonah avoided eye contact altogether. Their clothes were neat, but they looked like they had been rushing, hair messy, breathing slightly harder than normal. They stepped inside quickly, thanking her in low, hurried voices. Emily tried to brush away the strange vibe as she guided them into the living room. Maybe they were tired. Maybe something stressful had happened at work. Adults had problems too, she understood that. But as she walked toward the hallway to retrieve the documents, she heard them whispering urgently. Behind her, the tone wasn't normal, it wasn't casual conversation, it was fear and something darker. Like worry that she might see or know something they didn't want her to know, Emily paused for a moment near the doorway, pretending to adjust a picture frame on the wall so she could listen. Their voices were low but tense. She can't find anything, Jonah muttered. Mark replied sharply, just keep calm. We get the papers and go. Her heart skipped. Papers? Calm? What exactly were they so nervous about? Before she could question it further, she forced herself to continue down the hallway. She tried to ignore the uneasy feeling spreading through her chest. She wasn't a suspicious person. These men had been in her home 1,000 times. They were trusted, familiar, safe, or so she always believed. Emily reached her father's office and began digging through drawers, trying to find the folder he wanted. The air felt heavier now, as if her instincts were finally waking up, screaming at her that something wasn't right. A rising sense of dread curled around her, almost suffocating. She didn't know it yet, but by letting them inside, she had opened the door not just to 2 old family friends, but to a buried truth that would shatter everything she thought she knew about her parents, her home, and her own childhood. And the first crack in that truth was only moments away. Emily searched through her father's office with growing frustration. The desk drawers were cluttered with old receipts, half-finished projects, and forgotten memories. She knew her father was disorganized, but today every misplaced item felt intentional, like the house itself was trying to hide something from her. The air felt heavier, and the uneasy whispers she heard earlier replayed in her mind. As she moved aside a stack of dusty binders, her hand brushed against a torn manila envelope sticking out from under a pile of old notebooks. It looked out of place, like someone had tried to shove it deep into the back of the drawer and failed. Her curiosity, already sharpened by the strange behavior of her father's friends, pulled her toward it. Emily slid the envelope free. It was unmarked, worn along the edges, and unsealed. She hesitated for a moment. It wasn't hers. She shouldn't invade her father's privacy, but something inside her insisted she open it. When she tipped the envelope, several glossy photographs slipped into her hand. For a moment, Emily didn't understand what she was looking at. The images showed a woman, beautiful, familiar, laughing, walking, embracing someone behind the camera. Her mother. Emily's breath caught. She had only a few photos of her mother left. Most were stored away, painful reminders of a woman who left years ago. But these pictures were different. They weren't family photos. They weren't taken by her father. They were taken in secret, and more unsettling. One picture revealed her mother sitting on a wooden fence, smiling at someone from behind the lens, a man whose hand appeared briefly in the corner of the frame. A hand wearing a heavy silver ring, a ring Emily recognized immediately. Mark's ring. Her heart dropped. In that moment, everything around her seemed to freeze, the ticking clock, the muted sounds from the living room, even the air in her lungs. She stared at the picture, numb, unable to form a thought. Her mother had always been a painful mystery. Her father said she abandoned them after a long period of fights and emotional distance. Emily grew up believing her mother simply chose to walk away, but these photos told a different story. A hidden relationship. A betrayal. A secret her father never spoke of. Hands trembling, Emily gathered the pictures and returned to the living room. With each step, the truth grew heavier. When she entered the room, Mark looked up at her quickly. His face went pale the moment he saw the photos in her hand. Jonah straightened in his seat, his eyes narrowing with panic. It was as if they already knew what she had found. Emily felt the room shrink around her. Suddenly she understood the nervous whispers, the fear in their voices, the urgency to get the papers and go. They weren't afraid of paperwork. They were afraid of her finding the past, and as Mark's guilty eyes met hers, Emily realized that this was no misunderstanding. Something had happened between him and her mother, something that shattered her. Family long before she ever knew the truth, and this was only the beginning. Emily stood frozen in the doorway, clutching the photos so tightly her knuckles turned white. Mark and Jonah stared at her as if she were holding a weapon, not harmless photographs. In a way she was, because these pictures had the power to expose everything they had tried to bury for years. Mark swallowed hard, his shoulders stiffening. Where did you find those?" he asked, voice thin and trembling. Emily didn't answer. Instead, she stepped further into the room, letting the silence speak for her. The tension was so thick she felt she could cut it with a knife. Jonah stood up abruptly, as though ready to snatch the photos from her, but Emily stepped back, raising them slightly in warning. "Sit down," she said, surprising even herself with how steady her voice sounded. "Both of you." Jonah froze. Mark sank slowly back onto the sofa, but his gaze stayed fixed on the pictures. Emily could see fear forming in his eyes, not fear of punishment, but fear of truth finally coming to light. "I thought my mother left us," Emily said quietly. "That's what my dad told me," that she walked out. "But these pictures," her voice cracked as she held one out toward them. "This wasn't taken by my father. This wasn't just some random moment. This is personal." Mark's face tightened with a pained expression, guilt, regret, and something else Emily couldn't yet identify. Jonah, however, looked furious, not at Emily, but at Mark. "You said everything was handled," Jonah hissed under his breath. Emily caught it instantly. "Handled?" she repeated, stepping closer. "What does that mean?" Mark rubbed his hands together anxiously. "Emily, listen. It's complicated. Your mother, she was going through a lot. She wasn't happy. She confided in me sometimes. I shouldn't have let it go that far." "Let what go that far?" Emily demanded, her heart pounding. She was terrified of the answer, but even more terrified of not knowing. Mark opened his mouth, but no words came out. Jonah shot him a warning look, but the pressure was too much. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, Mark said, "Your parents were having problems because of me." The world seemed to tilt. Emily felt her stomach drop as a cold chill spread through her. Mark continued, shaking, avoiding her eyes. "I was around the house a lot. More than I should have been. Your mother was lonely. Your father was working long hours. Things happened. Words were said. Lines were crossed. But she didn't betray your father, not the way he thinks. I made things worse. Emily's breath hitched. Worse? How much worse? Jonah placed a hand on Mark's arm. Stop talking, he insisted. This isn't our story to tell. Emily's voice rose unexpectedly. Then whose story is it? My father's? The man who spent years drowning in guilt? Or my mother's? The woman who disappeared without a trace? Neither man answered, but their silence was an answer on its own. Emily realized this wasn't just about a few photos. It was about a history of manipulation, twisted loyalty, and a past deliberately kept in the dark. And now, with the truth slipping through cracks Mark could no longer hide, Emily understood one thing. This was only the surface. The real story was deeper, darker, and she was about to uncover it all. Emily's hands trembled as she backed away from the two men. Their half-confession had opened a door she could no longer close. There were too many gaps, too many unanswered questions, too many things her father never dared talk about. And now, she knew her mother wasn't the villain of the story. Something had been done to her, but Emily needed more than guesses. She needed the truth. Without saying another word, she turned away from them and marched back toward her father's office. She heard Jonah call after her, but she didn't slow down. If they were hiding secrets, the answers had to be somewhere in that room, a room her father always kept locked. A room packed with untouched memories. Emily pushed open the door and flicked on the light. Papers still littered the desk, but now that she knew something deeper was wrong, she noticed details she missed before. Drawers slightly misaligned. Dust wiped in certain places. Items that looked moved recently. Someone, maybe her father, maybe someone else, had gone through this office searching for something. She began opening drawers again, more deliberately this time. She checked behind folders, beneath old manuals, even inside books. Her breathing grew heavier. If her mother had tried to communicate, tried to leave anything behind, it had to be here. When she reached the bottom drawer, the one her father almost never opened, she found a small wooden box pushed to the very back. The box was simple, scratched, and old. Emily recognized it instantly. It belonged to her mother. She had seen it as a child, filled with notes, trinkets, and small keepsakes. Her heart pounded as she dragged it out. Dust covered the top, as if no one had opened it in years. She lifted the lid slowly. Inside were only two things: a faded photograph of her mother holding Emily as a baby, and a sealed envelope with her mother's handwriting. Emily felt her knees weaken. Her mother never left personal letters lying around. For this to be hidden meant it was important, dangerous even. She hesitated for a moment, then carefully tore it open. The letter was long, written in shaky handwriting. As Emily read the first few lines, her throat tightened. Her mother wrote about fear, about not being believed, about lies whispered into her husband's ears by people he trusted, about feeling trapped, cornered, accused of things she hadn't done. She wrote about Mark, how he had confessed feelings for her, feelings she did not return. How, when she rejected him, everything changed. Accusations began. Rumors spread. Her father grew distant, confused, angry. But the worst part was a single sentence that made Emily's heart ache. "I'm leaving to protect you, Emily, not from your father, but from the people around him." Emily wiped tears from her face as she continued reading. Her mother planned to return one day when it was safe, but something or someone had prevented that. The letter ended abruptly, as if written in a hurry. Suddenly, footsteps approached from the hallway. Emily clutched the letter, eyes wide. Mark's shadow appeared in the doorway. "You weren't supposed to find that," he said softly, and in that moment, Emily realized the truth was far More dangerous than she imagined. Emily felt every muscle in her body tense as Mark stepped slowly into the office doorway. He wasn't yelling, but the quiet heaviness in his voice was far more terrifying. "You weren't supposed to find that," he repeated, eyes fixed on the letter trembling in her hands. Emily instinctively stepped back, clutching the paper to her chest. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew about this letter. You knew she didn't leave us by choice." Mark's jaw tightened, guilt flickering across his features. Jonah followed him into the room, his expression torn between panic and anger. Emily stood her ground, even though her heart raced so fast she could feel it in her throat. "I deserve the truth," she said, steadying her shaking voice. "No more half answers, no more lies. Tell me what you did to my mother." Jonah looked away, but Mark didn't. He sank onto the edge of the desk, running his hands over his face. Years of secrets seemed to weigh on him, dragging his shoulders down. For the first time, Emily saw the man behind the practiced smile, someone haunted by the consequences of his own choices. "It started with feelings," Mark said quietly. "Feelings I never should have had. Your mother was kind, gentle, and she listened. I convinced myself she cared for me the same way." Emily felt sick, but she didn't, Mark added. "When I confessed, she rejected me. She was loyal to your father, too loyal. And I didn't handle it well." Jonah closed his eyes, shame washing over his face. Emily clenched the letter, fury building in her chest. "So you punished her? You ruined my parents' marriage because she wouldn't choose you? It wasn't supposed to go that far." Mark insisted, voice cracking. "I told your father things. Half-truths, suspicions, moments taken out of context. He believed me. I was his best friend. He trusted me more than anyone." Emily felt her breath leave her in a rush. "You turned him against her," Mark nodded slowly, "and Jonah stayed silent. He didn't stop me." Emily turned her furious, gazed to Jonah, but he couldn't even look at her. "What about the photos?" she demanded. "Were those meant to twist the knife even deeper?" Mark swallowed hard. "They were innocent moments. Friendly gestures, but I made them look like something else. I let your father jump to the worst conclusions." Emily felt tears burn behind her eyes, not from sadness, but from rage. They didn't just break her parents apart. They destroyed her mother's life. They poisoned her father's trust. And they shaped Emily's entire childhood with a lie. "She left to protect me," Emily said, voice trembling. "Not from my father, but from you." Silence flooded the room. Mark's eyes glistened with remorse, but it was far too late for regret. "You don't understand," Jonah whispered finally. "If your dad ever learned the truth, everything would fall apart. Our friendships, our lives, his entire world." Emily stepped forward, her expression cold and determined. "Then it's time," she said, "because mine already has." Mark's face turned pale. Emily raised her phone. "I recorded everything." Jonah lunged toward her, but Emily darted back, dodging his reach. "Stay away from me," she shouted, and for the first time, both men realized they had lost all control, and Emily was done being their victim. "I can now write." Emily's chest tightened as Jonah's steps faltered. He stopped mid-lunge, realizing the situation had slipped far beyond his control. The room fell into a ringing silence. Only Emily's ragged breathing and the faint hum of the ceiling fan broke the stillness, the recording icon glowing like a warning light. Mark lifted his hand slowly, as if surrendering. "Emily, listen, we never meant for things to turn out this way." But Emily wasn't listening to excuses anymore. "You stole my family," she whispered. "You stole my childhood. And you let my father suffer for years while my mother ran for her life." Mark's face crumpled. Jonah stepped back, guilt eating away at him, but his silence only deepened the betrayal. Emily backed toward the door, keeping both men in sight. She didn't know what they were capable of when cornered, but she knew one thing: she wasn't safe with them anymore. She slipped into the hallway, clutching her phone and her mother's letter. With shaking fingers, she dialed her father. He answered on the second ring. "Emily, is everything okay?" Her voice broke. "Dad, you need to come home, now, and bring the police." There was a long, stunned pause. Then her father's voice hardened an edge she had rarely heard. "I'm on my way." Emily stayed in her bedroom with the door locked until she heard the police arrive. Officers escorted Mark and Jonah out of the house. Mark didn't resist. He looked defeated, crushed by years of guilt finally clawing their way to the surface. Jonah kept his head down, his silence a final confirmation of everything they had done. When her father finally walked through the door, Emily collapsed into his arms. He held her tightly, more tightly than he had in years. For a long moment, they said nothing, just held on to each other. Two people bound by pain they never deserved. Finally, Emily handed him the letter. Her father read every word in complete silence. When he finished, tears streamed down his face. Not the tears of weakness, but the tears of a man realizing he had been manipulated, deceived and robbed of the woman he loved. "I believe them," he whispered. "I believe my friends over my own wife." Emily pressed her forehead to his shoulder. "They made sure you did." The following days were a blur. Investigations opened. Old statements were re-examined. Even neighbors came forward with stories they had been too afraid to share years ago. Mark cooperated fully, confessing everything. Jonah admitted his part too. And slowly, the truth pieced itself together like a broken mirror finally reassembled. But the final twist came a week later. Emily and her father found a return address written faintly on the back of the letter, an address her mother had moved to after fleeing the toxic circle that once surrounded their family. For the first time in years, hope flickered between them. Emily looked at her father. "Do we go?" He nodded, eyes soft but determined. "We do." And so, father and daughter set out not only to confront the past, but to reclaim the love stolen from them. A new beginning was finally within reach.